We know that teams with gender representation in the top quartile drive 15% higher return. If you have one woman on your board as a company, you will have better results, right? This is, not Carolyn's data. This is Deloitte. This is Chief. This is IBM. These are studies. This is data that is out there. So if you have more diverse teams, you have better decision making. You get through meetings faster. Like, hallelujah, thank you. I could do with less of those. If you have more diversity of thought, you bring innovations to market faster. It's been proven.
Welcome to What If, So What, the podcast where we explore what's possible with digital and discover how to make it real in your business. I'm your host, Jim Hertzfeld, and we get shit done by asking digital leaders the right questions. What if, so what, and most importantly, now what? In last count, in 2021, over 1 trillion semiconductors were manufactured globally, taking the total number of semiconductors on the planet to a gazillion. And I might be exaggerating a bit, but the reality is that all this talk about digital would not exist without this fundamental technology. And from my perspective as a digital strategist and a former co-op engineer at this company, no other company has had a bigger impact on making digital real than Intel. And I'm excited to welcome Carolyn Henry to explore more about that impact straight from Intel headquarters. Welcome, Carolyn. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Jim. So excited to be here.
So, Carolyn, tell us a little bit about your role at Intel. Like, what are you guys working on, and how'd you get here?
Yes, I'd love to. So I'm the Vice President and General Manager of America's Regional Marketing, which is an amazing role. And I get to work with our teams across Canada, the US, and Latin America to bring all of Intel's stories for all of our business units and product offerings to life in the market. So I get to explain to folks why and what is an AI PC and why you might want one. I get to help our stance in the data center. I get to work across our networking and edge storytelling and really drive that AI everywhere narrative that Intel has very unique offerings in. So it's such an exciting space. And I get to work with 60 of the finest marketers on the planet. And I'm based in headquarters in Santa Clara, California.
Great. So what did prepare you for this, Carolyn? I love that. I always ask this question, for this moment, not this podcast, but maybe this, this stage in your career. Like, what do you think really prepared you for this?
Yes. Well, I've spent almost 20 years in the data center, right? Working from companies like IBM on the other end in software, and really kind of abstracting that back into how all of this technology works together was such a fun journey across my career, right? So I'm stepping my toes into the mainframe space in the beginning of my career. And then, yes, I'm dating myself. And
What's
then, that? And there's still 2000 running globally. And then also, working across all of the B2B landscape to understand, how the hardware and software comes together to really deliver powerful solutions for customers. So I think it's really prepared me to step into Intel and tell that combined hardware, software, and systems story.
So there's a side conversation we're not going to have about cloud versus data center, because the funny definition of cloud that I heard once was someone else's data center. So anyway, it's really fundamental. And I think this is really what people don't see. I mean, how many people, have been to a data center, right? Probably not a lot.
Not a lot.
But as digital really takes over, I've been in one. I've been in a clean room too, but that's another story. So as digital takes over, I think, more and more of our interactions, right? It's really ubiquitous, with brands, with your friends, with your work life, it just sort of blends into the woodwork. I think, again, people probably don't wake up and think about the data center, but I think we can appreciate the fact that it's powering so many things, devices, our appliances, it's all around us. So, I think that was, a great question that really you posed, which was that I want to ask you and get your take on is what if, what's powering this, what Intel is really powered, is based on semiconductors, right? Chips and integrated circuits and the boards that they drive. So what if semiconductors were gone for just one day? What would happen?
Oh my gosh. Well, I love this question and the creative exercise, but I think, you hit on it because every company, right? Really, every company right now is a tech company, right? So if you think of Walmart, it's absolutely a tech company, right? If you think of Uber or you think of Instacart or how you get your groceries. So in our day-to-day lives, right? Even just picking up our phones and walking through the day of an everyday mom, dad, whomever, right? You cannot avoid the technology and that insatiable demand for processing power, right? I think, each one of us is generating,
Mhm.
exabytes every day, every year, right, of data that goes back and forth that's held privately for us and securely for us and used to make decisions about, what offers we get or what marketing comes to us, right? Like there's this whole ecosystem around the data that one person, one individual creates. And you can imagine all of the compute power that's needed to move that across the network, across from data center to cloud, regardless of where it is, somebody else's data center. It's not
Right.
actually, in the cloud, it's physically somewhere. And then, I think if you imagine what would happen without semiconductors, right? We would come to a screeching halt. We saw some of this happen during the pandemic when there was a supply chain shortage where folks couldn't get the chips they needed to install in the cars, right? That were coming off the assembly lines. We saw that huge demand go through the roof. And I think what's so interesting for me from where I sit is it's a $600 billion industry that could reach somewhere in the trillions, right, over the end of the next decade. And it permeates every single aspect of our lives. So, you could think about, oh my gosh, there would be a communication breakdown.
Right.
We work with some of the biggest telcos in the world, right, to equip their base stations. And, those would not be around. We would have transportation disruptions. I kind of mentioned some of that already. Healthcare services. I mean, my gosh, the
Oh my God.
partnerships that Intel has with General Electric and their imaging. I mean, for folks, who have experience an MRI, right? We have amazing advanced technologies in there. So poof, those would be gone, right? We would absolutely see a financial systems freeze. I don't want to paint too terrible of a picture for folks,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
just goes to the essential nature of what we work on, which is so gratifying to me personally,
Yeah.
but that we must really have this resilient and secure supply chain around our semiconductor manufacturing and delivery to the world.
Right. Right.
I'll
And
pause. I'll
so,
take a breath, Jim.
yeah, and I'm just going to build on that. I mean, I live, close to New Albany, like in Ohio, where you guys are building a plant, I believe,
Yeah.
right? A fab. So please tell me, okay, make sure I got that right. I'm keeping up. So it's interesting to see that happening in the Midwest, but that goes back to like you said, resilience and demand, and certainly geopolitical implications of that with manufacturing, in APAC. So yeah, it's not going away. And you mentioned, just the everyday telecom and manufacturing and kind of driving our jobs. You mentioned, but healthcare. I mean, anyone who's had to go to the ER or get something done or had an image taken, we take a lot of that for granted. So yeah, definitely impacts every aspect of our lives. And I thought, okay, I remember there was a blackout about 20 years ago in the Northeast. I lived through that. I don't know if everyone remembers that, but it was like, okay, let's go camping for a day. So that is, that would be my response. Maybe everyone goes on
That'd
a
be the
1 day camping
experience, right?
trip.
Let's go camp.
Yeah, right. But then, but how do I get to my campsite without,
Mhm.
a GPS? So, we're not talking about it. You're not, this hypothetical is not about an outage, but appreciation of things that just exist right today. They're everywhere. It really is ubiquitous. If there's one thing that, next to oxygen that we need to run our everyday lives, this might be it.
Right. And Jim, I'd love to build on that because you gave me the opening with Ohio, but Intel put the silicon in Silicon Valley, right? And now we're really trying to
Yeah.
create a silicon heartland, right? And we're doubling down on fabs in the Western Hemisphere, in Phoenix and Arizona and
Mm,
New Mexico, and ensuring that we can control more of our destiny because over the last decades, we have ceded some of that technology leadership to other geographies. We're also,
right. Right.
looking at Germany as well. And I think, if folks, we've been talking about everyday usage too, if you kind of abstract that out to supercomputing, right? And our x86 infrastructure, those Intel Xeons. So now I'm geeking out on your audience, right? But
Yeah.
that's
Go
the
for it.
most pervasive, infrastructure that we have. And they're in some of the world's best supercomputing instantiations, like Mila in Canada. And they're working on real human existential problems like cancer and climate change. And all of that research, right, could not be done without the processing power and the leadership processing power that Intel can bring to market. So if folks are thinking, the auto example is too mundane, like let's think about, climate change or the health of our oceans, right? And, cancer research as well. So.
And you mentioned, AI, right? AI computation and some more of that is kind of heading into the chips. Is that kind of the right way to interpret that?
Absolutely. We have these amazing systems on the chips with a compute processing unit, a graphical processing unit, and a neural processing unit. So we call NPUs. And the combination of all of that technology on one chip is a really powerful solution for the AI workloads that we're seeing really come to bear right now. So we have wonderful partnerships with OpenAI and discussions with Sam Altman and, all of the applications that AI needs to drive and will be driving and is driving can run and do run on Intel processing.
That's awesome. And I love that frontier of, around edge computing and ambient computing, and not to take away from the data center, but, some of that computing that's out in the field on demand, in place. And you guys are making that happen, and without having to call back to somewhere, right?
Yeah. No, those edge use cases are some of the most powerful, right?
I think
you don't have that time for latency to go back and forth. You need your processing right there.
Right. Boy, this is like this. You're going deep. Latency, x86. Like this is one. It's a tech conversation.
Hey, I started as a technologist. Now I'm a marketer. I think it's a good combo.
All right, I got to agree. So I think we have a lot of everyday things. I'm just wondering if you had sort of line of sight on some sort of unexpected or emerging areas where you think, semiconductors are making new impacts, maybe, especially building on some of this edge computing. I mean, what are you kind of seeing out there from your customers? Anything you want to share with things we haven't even thought about yet?
Oh, well, I'll share kind of a consumer lens too, because of course we have the B2C area with our partners. And I think that space is so exciting. So if you think about, productivity, gaming, and creativity, right? So these are everyday things that folks want to do. Our Gen Z, our younger folks are absolutely like 80% gamers, right? So the use cases to use AI to drive a better gaming experience, to use the Intel infrastructure to really bring that to life. It's so exciting, and it's right now, right? So I don't want people to think that they have to wait. 5-10 years from now, you can go into a retailer and purchase an AI PC and get some of these AI benefits into your life right now. So maybe some of us have experienced Zoom calls or all of that came with remote work, right? The noise cancellation, the meeting minutes, the background imaging, so my hair doesn't look fuzzy, right? Like all of this is happening with AI, right? But we just kind of haven't connected it to that category yet, right? But there are so many use cases that our software vendors are working on. There's like new and exciting areas every day. And I'm just really excited to see what our combined ecosystem, moves together. So.
Yeah, I love these incremental changes. I was talking to somebody this morning, about, okay, what are you seeing in your corner with AI? And sometimes we're looking for the big thing, and a lot of it's just a lot of small things, right? Hey, we can optimize this transaction. If I can optimize, I have a call coming in and I, can optimize, the mood or the sentiment of this person who's coming in, and I can react to that in the call center. I mean, just tiny little optimizations. I feel like that is going to, add up, right, to a lot of things. And what I love about that is, people can just sort of create a mindfulness, right, a consciousness about what they do in their jobs every day, or how they observe their customers, or their prospects. So, and gosh, I need to get back into gaming because it's amazing. The immersiveness. It's just there's nothing like it. So, one of the things, I really admire Intel and what they've done for years, and we're going to digitize how we work. We're going to have remote calls or remote podcasts, but, we work with a lot of traditional companies, manufacturers, banks, retailers. You mentioned they're digitizing their business, but also their products and their service offerings. Like you said, every company is a technology company. I guess how would you challenge some of those companies and those brands that you work with who are not quite embracing these innovations to think differently? I think everybody's looking for that way of doing it. How do you see companies challenging themselves to think differently?
Yeah, well, we see a ton of innovation coming out of some of those traditional sectors, right? I think that the budgets and the power behind the transformation may have shifted a little bit, right? So, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, folks were talking about digital transformation projects. And now that has shifted to, okay, what's our AI project going to be,
Yeah.
right? So it's just a different frame to have the conversation. But they're talking about, increased productivity for their workforces, better service offerings, and better customer interactions to drive that almost, the heightened expectations we all have as consumers, right? I have the same expectations of Amazon as I do of my bank, right? And so I can't go into that arena of the financial institution and be disappointed, right? So I think they're coming out with really innovative solutions that drive that customer loyalty, that drives that demand for their services in new and different ways. I think and that all comes back to compute, right? And what they're doing with the software and taking advantage and exploiting the hardware layers, also on top of trust and security. So I can't stress that enough, right? So, we have kind of a zero trust mantra, right? We have to make sure that, even down to the chip level, there is a heightened amount of security that folks can rely on, because that's,
right.
The world's banking data. That's your money. That's the commerce that we all rely on. So we have to ensure that is protected against bad actors as well.
No backdoors, responsible kill switches, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, again, things that people just don't think about, right? Because it's ubiquitous, it's technical. We're kind of along the lines of hypotheticals. I think you had a great challenge and a question for me I want to kind of raise for discussion. And where we opened was, what if we lost semiconductors for a day? Like, what if they didn't exist or never existed? I think there are a lot of challenges we're overcoming. And a lot of it's driven by digital, but it's not all digital, right? Not everything is a digital solution. But the question, I wanted to raise and kind of we could share a perspective on is, what if we were able to reach gender equity in a day or even for a day? I know that's near and dear to you. I have a daughter who recently graduated college and is in IT. She had a nudge. And so, I have a different perspective, or a renewed perspective, but just kind of wanted to get your take on that, Carolyn, when coming up in this industry, and you mentioned the mainframe. So you've seen a few things. Like, what's your take on where we're at from a gender equity and even women in tech perspective?
Oh, I love this topic. It's so important. And as you said, near and dear to my heart. I think, I would pop the champagne, right? Like, if we got there tomorrow, I am so not happy about having to wait 134 years, right? That's the World Economic Forum data that says we will get to gender parity in pay and representation in 134 years, right? That means that my daughter, I have a young daughter as well, her daughter may have a shot at kind of getting there, right? And we sometimes feel like, as women or women in tech, we've had wonderful careers and experiences, and it feels like that parity is at our fingertips, right? But then when you step back and you look at the data, it tells another very challenging story. So before I get all doom and gloom on our folks listening, right? I think we'd see so many gains, right? So one, we'd see better growth, right? We know that teams with gender representation in the top quartile drive 15% higher return, right? If you have one woman on your board as a company, right, you will have better results, right? This is, not Carolyn's data. This is Deloitte. This is Cheap. This is IBM. These are studies. This is data that is out there, right? So if you have more diverse teams, you have better decision making. You get through meetings faster. Like, hallelujah, thank you. I could do with less of those. If you have more diversity of thought, you bring innovations to market faster. It's been proven, right? There was a study in Europe of over 4,000 companies that drove time to market, sometimes 2 years faster if they had gender representation that was different than we are experiencing right now. And what we're experiencing right now is probably 18% of women are in senior leadership roles. And we know that if more women are leading companies, we're driving more growth. There is an upside of perhaps $7 trillion to the global economy, right? If we can really unleash our women in a new and different way. And that is so multifaceted, Jim. We could go on forever about, how early this starts. I work in the nonprofit space in education and STEM. And our young women are getting socialized out of math and sciences by third grade. So that's about 8 or 9 years old. They're picking up the cues and the biases in society and kind of self-selecting out or, being encouraged one way or the other. So there's so much we have to do to the education system, to even the childcare and support systems for parents and early parenting. I mean, it's just so fraught to be able to work on this multifaceted challenge, but it's one that, I think about often, I dive deeply into. I fully respect so many organizations that are really working at trying to approach this topic, but I am ready. I am ready for that day to be here tomorrow.
That is awesome, Carolyn. And as I've been in tech my whole life and built an appreciation over time. And proud to say I'm an ally, and not just for familial reasons.
Thank you,
I look at my daughter and I want the best for her, and I want her to be successful. But there are real challenges out there, and I do think the definition of mindfulness and understanding and awareness, and it comes down to like everyday education and practice is what I tell my colleagues. And I want to give a shout out to Kim Williams-Chopek, who is the co-founder of this podcast. And she's not on the podcast anymore because she's now the general manager of our commerce team, and she's too busy and doing an awesome job. She's one of my, we call her one of my tech idols. Like she's no nonsense. She knows what she's talking about. She's just got a great sensibility for our customers. So super shout out to Kim out there. I hope you're listening.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so we're proud of what we're trying to do as well. I'm glad we approached this subject because I agree with you that it's vital for in so many ways, right? For the health of our society and our families. And like you said, innovation. I love, a diverse team, a bunch of groupthink is not the answer, folks, to making new things and making old things run differently. So.
And if you think about what we were talking about earlier about AI and innovation, right? The growth and the job growth that we're going to see over the next decade, 5%, 6-7% higher in those technology sector jobs. So we want to prepare our young people to be able to take advantage of that job growth, and we want that to be equitable, right? I want 50% shot at it for all the genders, right? All of the fluidity of what we can experience, and make sure that that's not leaving anyone behind or leaving anyone out. And I think it's very, very important. And Intel's been very proud. And in 2019, we reached and exposed to the world kind of our pay equity standards. We have very aggressive RISE goals that we will march to and measure until 2030, when we can reach that better leadership percentage, an equitable percentage. And that is a large part of why, you'll see women flourishing at Intel, is because we measure it, right? And we absolutely are mindful about it and setting representation at all of those levels.
Well, measurement. I'll go back to Andy Grove and management by objectives. There's a lot of history there. I think that's where it started. I'm glad you brought up measurement. That's a whole other topic we could go into.
Absolutely. You get what you measure.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Say that again. we'll just put that on loop. So Carolyn, I really appreciate the time. This is a great conversation. Great to catch up on what Intel's doing and to hear you guys innovating, and you've always been on the forefront of things, and including driving gender equity and building the teams we need on this planet. But just one final thing, any advice, especially on that topic, like if for the listeners, I love to leave them with just like one thing they could do from your perspective, to reach that goal. What would you leave folks with an action that they can take?
Oh, okay. I'm going to do 2. All right. So for parents.
Okay.
So I want you to expose your young children and your girls especially to these amazing female role models. They're all around us. There's no lack of representation, right? Jim just shouted out one in his world. Expose them to people, because if you can see it, you can be it. And then for us in more leadership roles at companies, set those goals at every level and track them and make sure and hold people accountable to meeting them. So I went 2 ways on you, Jim. So
no, that's good. Actually, that's my new line for the rest of the week. If you can see it, you can be it. And then we'll just fall back to like, yeah, please measure your stuff. What? Great. Well, Carolyn, again, thanks so much for being on the podcast. And I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Oh, it's my pleasure completely. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
You've been listening to What If, So What, a digital strategy podcast from Proficient with Jim Hertzfeld. We want to thank our Proficient colleagues J.D. Norman and Rick Bauer for our music. Subscribe to the podcast and don't miss a single episode. You can find this season along with show notes at proficient.com. Thanks for listening.